What's up, everybody? Welcome to Movie Schmovie, episode number 251. I'm Steve, and who else is here with me?
I'm John.
I'm Ron.
The classic Ron John 1-2 punch.
That is so weird that you heard it as a Ron John. I heard it as a John Ron. There's drift on these phone lines, you know. There's weird space-time continuum stuff.
But yeah, so we got together today, keeping with our weekly releases. And, it's kind of going to be a loose episode, but we kind of wanted to just get together, talk about some of the current news in the entertainment industry, movies, some TV stuff, and, catch up on what we've seen in the past week. And just kind of go from there and kind of get back to what we've always done on this podcast, which is just kind of, and really where it started, which is just like getting together and talking about what's going on and what we've seen. So hopefully everybody's cool to go along with that with us. And, we'll see how it goes.
You did say this is episode 251. I think this is kind of noteworthy because way back in episode 175, it was right after we had sort of survived the transition from the Thundergrunt network back onto our own feed. So we had been on that network for a little while, and then we had to get our stuff back off that feed to its own feed.
Right.
And that was our first episode back from that transition, and so I think we were kind of declaring our intentions. And Ronald said he thought we might do 175 more. Which I think started a little joke we had for a little while that we were promising we were going to do 350 episodes. And I thought it would be fun if we kind of said, but we're not going to do more than that. Now we're saying that the end date for Movie Schmovie is episode 350. And if that is the case, then episode 251 is the first podcast in a kind of 100 podcasts up on the wall, kind of situation here. We're taking one down, and after this episode, there are only 99 Movie Schmovies left on the wall.
Wow.
So we can actually begin to create some false drama in every episode now with the sense that we're counting down from 100 to 1. And then when we get to 1, that's it. It doesn't matter what movie we cover that. If it's Trolls World Tour Part 7 or whatever, that'll be the last episode of Movie Schmovie.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
So counting down. This is your 99th from the last episode of Movie Schmovie.
Speaking of trolls, why don't we get into some of the news about Trolls World Tour and this theater to digital model that started because of COVID-19. Well, kind of kicked in a little more because of COVID-19 and the numbers that have kind of come out since then. Steve, first and foremost, how many of your friends have been talking about Trolls? I guess that's the first question I want to ask you too.
I mean, honestly, like almost all.
Yes, same, man.
I mean, the majority, if not all, and I mean that's mainly because, not only is it like a major release, but I mean like just having so many friends with young kids at this point that it's just like unavoidable. It's that title, but yeah.
I think for me, it's a little bit different in the sense that my kid has aged out of that. So for me, it's almost like this was the only place that I talked to any grown-ups about Trolls World Tour. And on Facebook, I have one friend who is just sort of a movie hound, kind of in our vein, who I believe his son might be a little bit older as well, but he was very curious about it. And in fact, I think he was trying to gauge whether he should have listened to our review before seeing it. And I kind of told him, hey, if you want to see it before you hear our podcast, because we didn't get into super spoilers, but there was enough there that I thought if someone wanted to see the movie, they might want to see it unspoiled. But that was it for me. But I did see, when I looked at sort of the press around the movie, I was sort of pleased to see not only was it getting a pretty positive response, which I think we all enjoyed the movie enough that we want it to get a positive response, but people were talking about and kind of praising the very aspect that we talked about a lot on the show, Ronald. The aspect of the way that it addresses the sort of legacy of pop music and cultural appropriation. So I thought it was kind of interesting that seemed to be a big reason why people dug into this kind of light and frothy movie, was this sort of, secretly heavy idea.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. The numbers were pretty incredible for the first week. It's like $30 million. Universal's been kind of quiet after the opening weekend, but $30 million domestic digital renting is pretty impressive, man. Especially considering, this movie definitely tonally seemed a lot different than the original, even in the commercials and the trailers and stuff like that. It's pretty impressive that it's it's doing as well as it is. And I want to ask you guys how you felt about the idea that, considering that we may be in this for a little bit longer, do you think that studios will be willing to let go of the B-, C+ level films and kind of put them out, see what happens, throw them in a piranha tank, see what happens? How you guys feel about that idea?
I mean, I think it's pretty amazing. I mean, this is probably the kind of title. I mean, it may not be like a 4-quadrant type movie, but I mean, like, it's as close to they could have probably hoped for in these times to kind of go all out with this. I just think it's really interesting, to see a movie like that, kind of do very well on video on demand. And I mean, like, just to kind of circle back for a second, like, basically it's kind of in this weird ether, just like kind of Netflix does, where like they don't really, like, those projections, like Ronald was saying, like the 30 million, like that's basically what they're guesstimating that it equates to. But I mean, like, they kind of do the same thing where they're not really truly like releasing numbers. Like they release like benchmarks and comparables and things like that, because they're so delayed. Like, those figures are so delayed. Like, it takes months for them to really release numbers like that. And when they're comparing it to titles in terms of performance, like Endgame and Jurassic World, Fallen Kingdom, which like were two of the higher grossing titles that it was like in all the press releases that they were comparing it to. It just, there's like literally months of delay. But I mean, based on the performance, the rentals, the windows, the different digital platforms that it's on, suffice to say, it seems like it's probably, if not, I think Universal probably, I think I already confirmed it, but that basically it was the biggest opening ever for a digital debut across all the platforms available for a video on demand release. And, basically saying that it was like 10 times bigger than the next biggest opening day for a traditional digital release. And I mean, they're not apples to apples, because some of those movies it's comparing it to, people already had gone and paid their money and to see them in theaters, like the two that I just mentioned, like Fallen Kingdom and Endgame. So it's a little different, because these are people that, these are first watches for a lot of people, where those titles that still did really well on the video on demand platform, like those are also movies that made over $1 billion at the box office. So it's definitely different in terms of metrics and measurements, but it is really cool and it is really interesting. It's a little scary, just because it did do very well. That it does kind of make you wonder. We've had this conversation on a couple of podcasts since we've been recording these weekly ones, just in terms of like, what's the big movie that's going to go for it on a window to release digitally, rather than like pushing back into the later summer, to the fall, to the winter, to the next year. And there's definitely got to be like there's a point at whoever's crunching those numbers for these movies, where there's going to be one of those. I didn't think it was going to happen before when we talked about it, but I'm kind of becoming a little more convinced that it could. If movie theaters are really going to not open until, July, August, September, October, whatever it is, and some of these theatrical chains are going through possible bankruptcies and things like that, like that's just a really scary territory to bank on. So yeah, this movie doing well, it kind of makes me wonder if there in fact will be a kind of bigger title, maybe not the blockbuster size titles like Wonder Woman's or the Bonds, but movies that are just a step below that, maybe, and maybe even like a couple steps above Trolls World Tour in terms of just, their the bigness value to them.
It's such a risk, though, Steve, because it's like they have to. I know you're talking about the number crunchers reaching that point where they can say this movie pivots on this point where we can make a big splash with it because it will be the biggest movie ever released directly to home.
Exactly.
The screens, however, whenever you do that, there's no question that it's a bit of a sacrificial lamb in terms of what the theatrical box office projections should be for a movie like that. So it's almost like it has to be a significant enough movie to be the kind of movie that we're talking about, but an insignificant enough movie for a studio to risk it in that way. And then you compound that with the fact that what if it's longer than we thought? Then some of the movies that they've scheduled for the fall suddenly become weird liabilities where it's like, are we just never going to put movies out anymore? You know, some of these movies that are scheduled for September might come out at home if this situation evolves in a way that is you know, against what we hope for. So there's such a big question for me of what type of movie and exactly what that movie would be, because it's a little bit of a slap in the face to whatever that movie is to say, we kind of want to make our buck on it now and we're willing to make less. But in a strange way, if you're on the sort of, I'm imagining that some of these Hollywood folks that are excited about new technology, they might be going like, okay, is this an opportunity to create a whole new model? I mean, Trolls World Tour came out and people that were plugged into children's entertainment knew about it. But like I said, outside of that, it wasn't a huge splash. Imagine one of these movies that does have that massive marketing push where everyone in the world knows it's coming out, and yet it's coming out at home. We haven't really seen that before.
Yeah, and on top of that, we also didn't mention that the purchase of the film actually is not a purchase; it's a rental. So you cannot buy this movie right now. It's just a rental for 3 days or 48 hours, depending on what service you use, and that's it. And for it to make $30 million, with people looking at that business model and agreeing to it, it's pretty crazy. I also want to throw in the idea too, through like friends and people that are close to me that work in businesses that are like, you know, venue based. People are speculating that in these venues that things aren't going to continue. Public things aren't going to be here until like next fall, when people feel comfortable going to things, which is crazy to hear. You know, it doesn't feel good to hear, but it may be factual, that because there's the idea of letting people out, you know, letting us be okay with the whole idea of being comfortable coming outside, and then how many people are going to be comfortable going to these theaters, going to these concerts, going to these larger events.
How comfortable would you be, Ronald, if you had a ticket right now? I'm looking at that fall going like, okay, now I don't even know if concerts that have been pushed back to the fall are going to happen. But beyond that, how comfortable do I feel about going into a room full of however many hundreds of people, and people are coughing and people are sneezing? I mean, again, I keep thinking beyond all this other stuff that we talk about. Like, I don't want to get this.
So, I mean, I'm a live sports guy. Like, I bought partial season tickets to the Wizards the year before last. I planned on doing it at the next season, the season after this one. I mean, you know, because this is pretty much a crapshoot. I don't know what's going to happen for the end of the NBA season, but I had planned on getting tickets. Now, if we get to a point where like they're saying we're okay, and maybe there's like this changed sort of environment where people are still wearing masks out in public, I honestly would be maybe okay with getting some tickets to a Wizards game next year. But I gotta be honest, if certain states are going to start earlier than others and people aren't really listening to the protocol, I can't feel comfortable with somebody coming from a place that started earlier that hadn't social distanced, coming to DC, sitting right beside me and maybe giving me something. That drives me crazy. That isn't like a uniform plan for the country, and states are able to make those decisions. I know that sounds a little weird.
No, that's exactly what you're thinking about. It's like defensive driving on the road. You can do everything about what happens in your car, but what about the other guy, you know?
Yeah.
I am now having these thoughts that I've never had before as a person who I don't love crowds, but if I have to deal with a crowd to do something I'm excited about, I'll do it. And now there's this whole other aspect of crowds that is, you know, nefarious.
Yeah, it's a strange thought, but like, you know, just kind of having friends and family that are in the business of crowd-based events, and then politics and stuff like that. You just hear things that sound like they're a little more truthful than the things you're hearing on TV, and it feels like it may be a while before this happens. So the idea of this happening, I know I was sounding like a jerk. Like, we kind of had this group chat, and I was just like, the world is changing at a pretty rapid pace, and maybe I'm feeling a little more because I work at Hopkins, you know, just full transparency. I work at Hopkins, and we get a series of these emails that just sound like people are prepared to not go back to work for quite some time. And I think that's going to affect entertainment as we know it for quite some time. And I think the things that we kind of hold sacred are kind of going to be destroyed because everything we've known up until this point has been destroyed. I don't mean like we're going to be miserable. I just mean that the way that business was done before is changing. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard like mid next year as a projection for certain live events. And when you think about that, you think about the industry that is going to be completely affected by that. There will be none of the present infrastructure for booking shows and for ensuring those things, like all the things that have to happen for a tour to happen, for a theatrical run to happen, for all this stuff to happen. That infrastructure is going to be kind of wiped away if it's a year from now. A lot of people are going to leave those jobs for other jobs. So, if you're like a local venue and you can't book any shows for a year and a half, what does that do? That just kills you. It's going to have to rebuild from the ground up. That pipeline of things that are in the works right now that you get to see in a couple months' time, that's being stopped. And I was thinking about this in terms of production for movies and TV shows, that like you're going to start to see announcements of delays of things that weren't scheduled to come out until next year or the year after that, because they can't work on them right now. There's going to be a huge ripple effect that we haven't started to see yet. And yeah, I think of all the people who are going to leave for other jobs and other industries, and it is going to have to be kind of rebuilt from the ground up if it goes on that long. But I've heard the same thing you've heard, Ronald, that some of the projections for how soon is it really viable to expect people to congregate in these areas in these large groups, like a big movie or a big show, that might not be September. That might be optimistic. I mean, it's already mid-April, and that happened in a blink of an eye. I can't believe it's been a month that my family's basically been wandering around this house bumping into each other. So
yeah, it's nuts.
I don't know. It's crazy. And yes, I believe that you can't slow things down this much without also taking a bit of time to start them back up, because they've slowed down now to the effect that it would be difficult to just say, all right, everybody back to work, even if they had a vaccine tomorrow, which they won't.
Yeah, it's a little nuts. So Steve, how you feeling about it, man?
I mean, I'm pretty much in the same mindset. I mean, I don't think, I'm probably even more, I guess, cautious with like just personally going back into participating with a lot of those kinds of events. I mean, those communal type events, like as much as I want to go back and see a movie in a theater, like I just, there's only, and especially like, I don't know, like a type A personality, like there's only so many things I can really be responsible for and controlling and to make myself like and my family and my parents and people that I care about possibly not get sick. And I mean, even when things start rolling out, like, nothing's really for sure. And I'd rather personally play things safe in most cases, because it's not a need, it's a want for me. But in terms of an industry and things like that, like it's really tough to imagine, people in all kinds of ancillary industries that touch movie theaters, whether it's film production or, movie studios or even like, special effects studios or, I mean, all the way down the line, every crew member that works on a movie, like, and TV show, it's just kind of crazy to see that ripple effect. And that's, where there's a want to like get back to normal. That's all over every piece of social media that you watch today, conversations all over the place. But I mean, when we talk about just the theatrical experience or just like, any kind of entertainment type of a venue, being more broad about it, it's a real risk, and it's a real scary idea to think about how much goes into rolling that kind of experience back out, to a point where people feel comfortable, but even just beyond people, that those responsible for those events and those facilities like feel comfortable, and responsible and ready to take on responsibility of certain things that they are doing or are not doing to ensure that, you're still trying to keep this thing, this virus or this disease, like, at bay in some way.
Yeah. It's a little strange, man.
But I don't know. It's pretty, it's unprecedented, and it's all just, I mean, in so many ways it's speculation, but it's just, I mean, even if you're talking best case scenario and into the fall, I mean, some of these things, to kind of circle back to the beginning of this conversation, a studio that is saying, oh, we have like no income streams happening right now, or not no, but very little income streams happening. I mean, it's gonna probably happen. If this is going into the fall, somebody's going to pull the trigger, and there's going to be like that movie that's just a notch below top tier blockbuster, $1 billion franchise guaranteed, that they're going to they're gonna start coming out, because that is an income stream for, you know, all parties involved, and that also would continue to be, you know, paying / funding anything that studio will have in production. And it's just watching the kind of performance that, you know, Trolls had, which is, you know, obviously being publicized as a pretty massive hit in scope. You know, there's probably some titles out there that would be, like John said, like that would now, if this is the landscape, want to go for that title of this is the largest digital release ever. You know, because at this point, from the way it looks, like that's what this movie is now, and that's, you know, lemonade. What is it? Lemonade out of lemons, like whatever that saying is. Like that's what they did with that movie, and it seems to be pretty smart, because it's not like it doesn't seem like it would have been the surefire, massive hit that the first one was. While it would have been bigger, obviously in theaters, but I mean, if it was 50 to 60 million opening weekend and it did 30 million on video on demand. And that was, you know, and some of those figures were coming out like for like first day, you know, not even the whole week or weekend. Like it was saying like first day, some of those figures were 10 times that of the next movie below it. So, I mean, what that ultimately looks like a month to 2 months when they release that number, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I've actually read a couple interesting articles, and the title, I don't know that it would happen with this title, because this is like a pretty big title for the studio that keeps coming up, is that the one that could do it is that Disney might do it for Mulan. And
yeah, I keep hearing that too.
I don't know. I mean, that seems like a pretty monstrous worldwide type of hit. And I don't know. I mean, and that's also like the live action, you know, collection that they're doing, and it's a pretty important film on a number of levels, and to not get the attention of like a monstrous like rollout publicity wise and everything, I don't know. It's just tough to see that or swallow that. But I mean, I think that movie's still a little above the threshold that I'm kind of envisioning myself, just looking at the landscape of what's coming out. But there are some other movies that, you know, are on the slate that, you know, have been moved around over the next 3 or 4 months that maybe are a little more appropriate. But I mean, the Mulan title, I do see that coming up in a couple of different articles that I've read this week about just the state of the industry and like what this video on demand platform could do or could be. Because they're also talking about like how when they're doing these, like the publicity budget, you know, promotional budget, all that stuff, like it's not as large as it, like that is kept in scope, you know, in terms of like a theatrical rollout. And, you know, there's a lot of details that they don't know in terms of like profit sharing of what portion of it that they make from a video on demand rental versus a, you know, a theatrical release, you know, because I mean, those are notoriously like their portion of that box office is not the number you always hear, you know. It's a big chunk off of it that the exhibitors take. But yeah, I don't know. It's really, really interesting, and it's like uncharted, and it's kind of weird. It's kind of weird, but it's the best case scenario for some of these titles, I think, to kind of just be shelved and like put back. Because the other thing on the back end of this that is pretty obvious to anybody that understands how it works is that, you know, there's only so much space for these movies, you know, like in terms of how far back they're going to get pushed. And, you know, certain movies are dying in the theater as it is. So to continue to push some of these movies back and to put them on dates where there's already 3 or 4 movies slated, I mean, you know, one of those movies is going to succeed usually on an opening weekend, and the other ones run the risk of bombing. You know, so like, what's the benefit of pushing a movie back 7 months if it's going to open against 3 other movies and fail, versus putting it out now or in a month or whatever it looks like, and maybe that movie has room to like succeed where it would have not before. You know, I don't know. It's just there's so many different scenarios. It's really interesting.
It is, man.
I'm very anxious to see like what the next title is, because nothing is there right now. Like there's nothing out there that is like, you know, the big title besides, like I saw Josh Trank, like his newly titled Capone, you know, the Tom Hardy movie that was called, I think, Fonzo or something like that. that got a digital distributor. Like, it's not going to theaters. It's coming out like the first week or second week of May on video on demand. And I don't know if that's a quality issue, but that's another movie that was supposed to be coming out theatrically that's not now. And that's going to be another title in a couple weeks that's going to be on demand. That's a quote unquote a new movie with a movie star in it. So, I'm curious to see how that does.
So are movies still hitting theaters right now? I mean, I've seen a couple of things that say released theatrically and at home, but right now there's no chains open, or am I wrong about that?
Well, I mean, I think there's still a market like where they're still going out into like drive-in theaters.
Interesting.
I don't know how many of them there are, but there's a lot. There are numbers in those box office reports for Trolls World Tour this past weekend that like the majority of any kind of theatrical box office was was drive-ins.
So could drive-ins have like a huge comeback under this? Because I'm honestly thinking I'd go to a drive-in to go see Black Widow.
Me too.
In the fall.
Me too.
I mean, I think in what's open, I mean, I think that domestically, I want to say I read somewhere that it was like 25 drive-ins that are still running in the country that it did get released into, and I want to say, I don't know, it was pennies like on what is normally expected. You know what I mean? Like it was not even in like 6-digit numbers. It was very, very low at those theaters.
Right, of course.
But they can still say it was released that way, day and date. They promote it that way. I think internationally there may be some chains that are still open. I don't know for sure, or independent ones that are still open. I don't know for sure. But yeah, it's more semantic. Like they're saying it's coming out in theaters still, but it's literally in the States. It's drive-in theaters, and I'm literally looking at it now. Yeah, it was 25 drive-ins.
Any diners and dives?
This is a good question.
So I have a little thought. I'm waiting for the bad news about some cool sounding project that you read about that you've just forgotten about, but you read about some team that came together for something. I'm going ahead and dreading like in a year's time when you find out, oh yeah, that didn't happen. That fell apart. That got pushed back and the people just went their separate ways because of this huge stop in work, because we are not yet to the point where the pipeline of work is completely done. There are a few things every now and then. I don't know if you guys have seen, you'll get a news notice about some show that has halted production, or some movie that has officially halted production, or some other movie that's they're doing effects work remotely or whatever. So there's still some effort to keep things moving, but at some point that part hunkers down too, and that system grinds to a halt. And that's kind of what we've been talking about this whole time, is once that part of the structure of making movies grinds to a halt, the production aspect, that is when there's nothing on the schedule. Like there's nothing new showing up on the schedule. I don't think these companies are going to let that happen. I think we're going to see a lot of behind the scenes shit and documentaries about the making of stuff. I'm trying to think of how they're going to take what they already have in the can and turn it into a way for some of these franchises anyway that we're trying to hit the certain point on the calendar every year. Like Disney has a lot of that stuff going on. You could view their live action remakes as a franchise. You could say Marvel. You could say the Star Wars stuff. All that stuff has to have a sort of regular dosage to get people into the next phase, and they don't have a next phase right now. I mean, Marvel obviously has a lot going on, but I'm not optimistic that some of those dates they came up with might even get pushed back for some of those movies that they bump back a couple months here and there. But, I mean, what's it going to be? Are these going to be sets where everybody on set has been tested and locked down and is living in some kind of quarantine while making the film? I mean, I could honestly see that start to happen. This is worth so much money to these companies. They might have to come up with a new way of making movies. But are they going to do that if the way these movies come out is this less than grand way to home theaters? Yeah. You know what I'm saying? At some point, everything has to readjust. I really wonder what that's going to look like. I mean, there is a lot of stuff being made for streaming services, so that might be the new model. That might be the new way these stories get told. And it might be that the big budget, giant motion picture experience is just something that can't really be viable for the studios. There's no holds barred in terms of how much they'll spend on a big movie like an Avengers movie or a Star Wars movie to make it work for audiences. Sure. If you don't have that possibility of making $1.5 billion, are you going to try so hard? I don't think they will. I think we should really look at these new TV shows that are coming out for Disney Plus as an indication of what the future might look like for franchises if theatrical movies take a huge hit like this.
Yeah.
But, who knows? In a few months, it might be so back to normal that conversations like this seem silly. I somehow doubt it, but I kind of hope that that's what happens.
Yeah, me too, man. I didn't mean to bum anybody out. It's just we're hitting a point now where we have to kind of adjust the way we were talking about all this stuff. It's changing a little bit. And
Yeah.
I think there's a strong possibility it may go back to normal, but there still is going to be a gap in that. And what the hell is going to happen during that gap?
Yeah.
Well, Ronald, you didn't bum us out. Honestly, I feel like if you're into movies right now, this topic is what's for dinner. Do you know what I mean? This is what you got to be thinking about, because you can get excited about something popping up on a streaming service or something you can see, and there's plenty of great shows to catch up on and to binge with and everything. But like, that's what you say. You binge with a show. Isn't that what you say? I don't binge at a show. I binge with the show. I'm compassionate that way. But like at some point you're going, well, wait a minute. There's not that that whole idea of what am I looking forward to right now? I was like, I don't know. I'm looking forward to any movies to come out,
right?
Any movies to get made, because I don't know how it happens. Again, I guess they can lock down the set and they can make it so that production can continue. But yeah, that still feels like that has to be months away. So yeah, who knows? Who knows what it's going to feel like when you look at the calendar of like late 2020 into 2021? There just won't be as much content, is my prediction. But maybe they somehow have so much in the can and they can work, in safe conditions, and it won't be as big of a deal. But it feels to me like that age of, there's so much television, there's so many movies. We might actually not feel that way in the fall.
That's gone. Yeah, what else is going on in the entertainment world?
I know you guys wanted to talk about this Michael Jordan project that is coming out. I'm intrigued by that sort of wide-ranging documentary or docu-series about someone like that. I know you maybe you could talk to me a little bit about what excites you so much about that project.
Sure. So it looks like ESPN and Netflix are releasing a 30 for 30 docu-series. Netflix overseas and ESPN domestic are going to be releasing a 10-part series about the last championship run with the Bulls called The Last Dance. Now, what makes this particularly unique is that Michael Jordan typically does not participate in documentaries. He didn't participate in the one about the Dream Team that was very incredible that came on a couple years ago. He just does not participate. So they have basically all the Bulls that are living participating in this documentary, including Phil Jackson, and it is hitting on a spot that is kind of a big moment in American sports history. So I'm super excited. Steve seems to be super excited. Steve, I know you kind of expressed it that you were excited as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is like growing up, I now I'm not as much into basketball as I was when I was younger, but this era of basketball, professional basketball, the Jordan highlight reel basically was when I was really into the sport and was just way tuned into the culture and just the athletes and just just the league itself. Like I was all about it. And he himself was obviously arguably the greatest of all time, depending where you fall on that. But yeah, like you said, what's most interesting about this is that he is notoriously kind of private, and he, even though he is one of the biggest personalities in the world at the time of at the height of his powers, he just since then and in the days since has been kind of quiet, private, and doesn't do a lot of interviews and kind of just does whatever he does in his retirement, and that's respect. I respect that. But yeah, I mean, what ESPN does with these 30 for 30 docs, the level of access that they have with the players, I mean, even sit down interviews with, who they have on this list of who they're interviewing beyond the Bulls players themselves, just the players across the league, even with Kobe being in it, and just seeing how widespread of a story this is going to be covering for arguably one of the greatest athletes ever to play a game anywhere. It's just wild. And I think it's also really interesting that it was supposed to come out in the summer and they pushed it up, you were saying, Ronald, basically to kind of I guess take advantage of a captive audience in all of us right now, people at home wanting something to watch. And it's pretty smart. So, I mean, I think they're going to be airing 2 episodes every Sunday, 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock, until the series ends. I think it's going to end the weekend of May 17th. So, I mean, we're going to get 10 episodes total of this story, and it's just, I don't know, man. Like, yeah, you look at that period in time at any professional sport across any platform, and, you just look at that run that he had, and the players around him had, that kind of, they all just were elevated by that talent and that personality, and just like, it was electric. And yeah, and what ESPN does with those 30 for 30s, to circle back, like that's it's amazing what they do with that docu-series that they have, and and what you've seen in some of the other, I think ESPN produced like sports related documentaries are just amazing. And for it to be about him, and in that time, I mean, just like a couple years ago, they put that OJ doc out, the Made in America doc. That was another ESPN production for the 30 for 30 series, and that's arguably one of the best like docu-series ever / movies, documentary movies, in my opinion. And I thought that was amazing. And for this to be about, Michael Jordan and the Bulls in the 90s, it's just, yeah, man, I can't wait to see it. And mainly because of the level of access and the fact that he's involved in it, it's going to be wild.
Well, I mean, I am not a sports guy, and nobody can miss that from a mile away. But, even I know that the Chicago Bulls of that era were mythic,
right? And
that this is when the sort of like the oven that baked the icon of what Michael Jordan became. That's when it happened,
right?
And I do believe, like, I can easily believe that these ESPN documentaries, I've seen the type of footage ESPN gets, I've seen the type of stuff they put together. The 30 for 30 stuff is interesting even to me as a non-sports person, just the way that it is done, the production value. Sports are so much at the forefront of how well can we film this, how well can we capture this in terms of photography and videography, that there's always amazing footage. And with just documentaries now, docu-series, there's an art to putting together these high-level docu-series where they can really wow you with just how slickly things are put together. And so you have this perfect storm of a subject that has got a lot of footage, and there's a lot of good-looking footage, and you have a company like ESPN that makes really slick product.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? It's like people are interested. Why not make a beautiful series? I didn't watch the OJ series, but I came close to, because everyone raved about it. I can totally imagine that if I were to watch one of these shows, the human drama would sweep me up, and I would get caught up, and I would totally be into it. I just haven't had that pull. But I'm really interested by something that you suggested, Ronald. I don't know if I got this right, but is Michael Jordan worried about how he's going to come off on the show, or is that just someone's speculation?
No, he was doing a press run on ESPN where they kind of were reflecting on his championships and the last 3 in particular, and he kind of said in passing, like, it kind of makes me look like a jerk, essentially is what he was saying. And we've all heard rumors about things that he's done. Steve Kerr's told the story on ESPN about being punched in the face by Michael Jordan during a practice. I'm very curious to see how honest they're going to be about how he was. And, he's an obsessive guy. I mean, people like Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, the people that are at the top of their sport, you hear about these obsessions leading to meanness, to be honest. Also really interesting, Michael Jordan started to get very vocal right around the time that Kobe Bryant passed away. He spoke at his funeral at the Staples Center, and that kind of started this goodwill that people kind of had for him. I mean, like, because he didn't really share anything openly into this documentary, so it's really interesting. I'm super curious.
And that comes out when?
This Sunday.
This Sunday.
Is that the 19th?
Yeah, this Sunday at 9 and 10 p.m. Like, it's 2 episodes each Sunday for the next 5 weeks.
They're taking advantage of that quarantine audience. There's a few things coming out right now that I feel like are going to really catch. Like What We Do in the Shadows just started their second season, and I feel like that show's going to get a little bump from the kind of Hulu.
Oh, definitely.
Now that FX shows come out on Hulu immediately, there's going to be a ton more people watching it. And I think, it's just I think it's going to have a little bit of a bump. So I think anybody that's got something ready to come out right now should capitalize and should realize, yes, this is a very welcome and thirsty audience at the moment when it comes to interesting new entertainment.
And we talked about this when we were talking about like Tiger King, the Netflix series. But like it's also, I'm so interested in this because it's kind of crazy to think about, just the idea that whatever 22, 23 years ago, whatever it was, when this last run happened, like with Jackson coaching and Jordan on the Bulls, that there was like it's just the idea that there was like a camera crew, like filming everything for that last season. You know what I mean? And like to go for that second three-peat, and it's just like crazy to think that all that footage comes together 2 decades later for a 10-hour series about that very thing. It's like insane to think about that's like going to be arguably one of the best things to watch on TV probably this year, or at least during, this spring, summer. And it's all because like of a moment in time 22 years ago when a sports team was doing something that like really has never been done. It's just crazy that the level of access and the level of footage that we're going to see, and that I've read that they have, which apparently is like it's insane footage of the team. It's just wild to think about that. Like when you talk about the access that we talked about, like with Tiger King, that like they just happen to be filming all this shit happening, and it's just like, oh yeah, we're going to sit on this, and obviously they've used some of that footage for things here and there. But it's like 20 years from now, we're going to really use this footage, or somebody's going to want it, and it's going to be this very special thing.
It's similar to Tiger King in that there's the thing you're there to film.
Right.
And then there's the people who are there to film what's going on because there's a big thing going on, and they're going to catch stuff that is not meant for film. That's not meant to be shown. So you got the stuff everyone's saying, here's what we're showing to the world, and then here's what we're revealing to the world at the same time. I think that is that's interesting. And again, that sports obsession has never been my jam, but I know that there were a million cameras there every time this team came out. So it is, it's got to be. It's got to be. Like I said, I'm sure I would get swept up in it because if it's well made, you don't have to be innately interested in the subject. And again, growing up in that era, I can't not have gotten a little bit of that. Oh yeah, that's a big deal. When you guys told me, I was like, oh, the Bulls? Like it's not just Michael Jordan, it's the whole team and it's the whole era. I didn't know how much those ESPN documentaries go outside the sports themselves into the lives and to some of more, the more tabloid aspects of the story. So I would imagine there would be a lot of both of that in terms of interest in someone like this. Because Michael Jordan, we do kind of want to hear the ways in which he's not perfect because he, for so long, was held up. It was a very controlled image. So I think that he has had a lot of bad press in the last decade and more. And it is, he is a little bit of, in that sense, like a tarnished icon. But I don't think it doesn't do anything to his legend somehow. You know what I mean? There's still something big. You just say his name and there's something about it.
Yeah, man.
Did anybody watch anything else, like a new movie or new content?
Yeah, I mean, I've been catching up on a bunch of movies that either just came out on video on demand or that I had kind of tracked down over the past couple weeks.
You want to give us a quick Ritz with Steve Ritter?
Yeah. A little quick Ritz. Majority of them are like kind of more kind of like horror thriller kind of type movies, but there's a movie called Sea Fever that I watched. It's kind of like a kind of disease. It's kind of timely, unfortunately, but like a boat crew on it's in like an independent film. I think it's an Irish production, but basically just something happens on this this boating crew, a fisherman crew, and this creature. They kind of like sail into this zone of the ocean where it's like a restricted area where something's in the water, and it's like there's a bit of a contagion element to it. But I thought it was pretty good. I mean, it doesn't really focus too much on the creature part of it, so it's less real a creature feature, but there's some amazing water cinematography in it, like when you do get to see what's down there. But I thought that was pretty good, so I would definitely check that out. And there's a movie called Harpoon that also came out on digital. That's kind of, again, three friends on a boat, and just all of their kind of secrets start to kind of come out, and you kind of learn about some, double crossing, and they kind of going after one another, kind of feels like a Danny Boyle kind of movie on a boat with like friends just watching their relationship just completely deconstruct and blow apart. It's pretty good and pretty violent and what's the word? A little gory, I guess. I don't know, but that was pretty good too. I watched a really good like kind of coming of age high school into college story called Banana Split with Hannah Marks in it that she co-wrote and is the star of. That was really good. It's very much like Booksmart. If you like Booksmart, you'd probably like this movie, maybe even more than Booksmart, possibly. I don't know. I don't know if it's better than that, but I really liked it.
Oh wow.
Same kind of story, like these two girls become friends. These two girls become friends over a summer. And the little caveat is that they're dating or having had dated the same guy within that last year of high school, and they kind of have this secret friendship over their last summer around, and kind of what happens during that time. But I thought that was pretty good too. And then last night, the one I probably most timely and most people may have heard about, Aaron and I finally got to check out. I've been wanting to see it in theaters and never got to, but Will Eubanks' film Underwater with Kristen Stewart, which, God damn it, I thought was really good. And
you liked it?
I really did, yeah.
I've heard that, and as a genre guy, I keep forgetting that's one I need to check out. So I'm glad you put it back on my radar.
It's like, yeah, dude, you guys will like this movie, and like I more than liked it. I thought it was really good. And it's unfortunately a victim, I think, of the Fox Disney merger. Apparently, like, it was shelved for almost 3 years before it got released, and it shows it in the fact that T.J. Miller is one of the stars of the movie prior to him, kind of being canceled.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's got this like cool Alien meets like The Abyss meets like this like. I don't know, like creature feature. I don't know. I don't want to give too much away because there's some cool shit that happens in the final act. But it was good. Like Aaron had no interest in watching this movie and was audibly fighting to not watch it. And she was into it, and she came out of it being like, "That was really good. I'm glad I watched it." So that'd be the one I recommend, just because I would have loved to have seen that in the theater too. Because for a movie that only had like a $50 million budget, it's in that weird in between of like, it looks way better than $50 million, and like it's kind of crazy that they accomplished what they did with $50 million, especially for like, it's got a pretty good cast too. Like I said, Kristen Stewart's in it. What else? T.J. Miller, Vincent Cassell, John Gallagher Jr., Mamadou Athie's in it. Like it's a cool cast, and like it's a bummer that this movie didn't do well. And I don't think it's like a bad movie at all. But yeah, I would definitely recommend checking out Underwater. Really cool visual effects, some really cool cinematography, like in water. Like practical stuff happening in the water with people in suits diving and stuff like that. Really kind of claustrophobic kind of shit. Like, kind of reminds me a little bit of The Descent, where like you're already in a very stressful environment where you don't need anything else to be bad, and then you kind of are enter a variable of like, there's a creature down here too, and it's just like, okay, this is not this was already not good, but it's like worse. It kind of has that kind of element to it. But yeah, I would highly recommend Underwater. I really liked it, and hopefully maybe it finds an audience on this platform. Unfortunately, it didn't in theaters. But yeah, those are the four that like I kind of watched over the past couple of days. But that's the one I would say is definitely try to check that out if you have a chance.
Ronald, maybe we can watch that, and then next week we can actually all three talk about a movie that we've seen recently.
Yeah.
Even if it's a kind of we are now in the age of, if we cover movies that are just sort of available, they don't have to have been recent movies. We can just catch up. It's time to catch up, everybody. Maybe that's what our culture is going to do for the next year,
right.
Is catch up on what's there.
Right.
I saw a movie called We Summon the Darkness. It's a direct to home I think this would have been a theatrical release, but maybe not. But it came out last week. It's sort of a horror riff on the Satanic Panic of the 80s. I don't know if you guys have seen, the trailers have been all over online. It's got Alexandria Daddario and Johnny Knoxville in it.
Yeah. I actually watched this one. I watched this one too, John. I saw this one too.
Well, what did you think of We Summon the Darkness?
You first.
Oh, wow.
I kept thinking something we said after we watched The Hunt, Steve, that we both agreed, was that it seemed to think it was funnier than it was.
Yeah.
It seemed to think it was more clever than it was.
Yeah.
And I can't blame the performers for giving it their all. It's similar, not similar, but it's similar to the lead performance in that movie being kind of an interesting but odd performance. I think Alexandria Daddario, I can totally see why she took this role. I can totally see why almost everybody involved got involved. But the movie doesn't really have much to do beyond, its central conceit. There's a sort of a first half hour, and then there's everything that happens after. And I think that you can see they put all their energy into that twist, that transition. And I think that, as with a lot of movies, a lot of horror movies, if you don't pace it just right, it starts to really kind of get repetitive and a little noisy in the last act, because you've already spun out all your ideas. And I think this is one of those. I thought particularly of interest was the way that they nailed music fans to some extent. There was some people talk. It's all about. You ever seen the documentary Heavy Metal Parking Lot, Ronald, or do you know what that is?
No.
It's an old documentary made by Penelope Spheris, I think, who went on to direct Hollywood comedies. But it's basically a bunch of people in the parking lot outside of a metal show in the early '80s. So she basically just captured the kind of people who show up early or wait in line or go and kind of tailgate for the afternoon before the show. So there's a lot of, interesting, and now it's a time capsule of 80s-ness, but it's also kind of hair metal-ness. And this movie almost seems like it's directly inspired by that, because it starts off with some metal fans showing up for a show, and then these girls that we follow into the situation hook up with these guys, and then they kind of go off together. And then the movie progresses from what happens once they all go off together. But their banter was, I don't know, it wasn't like the smartest banter in the world, but I thought it was pretty clever the way that it was written to show the way that people kind of show off their knowledge about the band that they're going to see. And there's a lot of, especially guys, trying to strut their stuff as like, I'm the guy who holds all the trivia here. So I thought that stuff was like good character work and pretty disarming. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that the performers are pretty good. I think this movie totally works on the backs of the actors making it work. But that once it gets beyond that initial plot point, it's like, oh, okay, now I kind of know what's going on. And it sort of doesn't do much for me after that.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think once the turn happens and they kind of show the cards of like what the movie is, I think up to that point it's kind of fun, and you're kind of wondering, and there's a bit of like kind of doubt or question of what's happening, even though it kind of is easy to tell what's going on. But I think from that point, it kind of stretches that second, third act out. It's like it's just stretched out way too far, and it kind of gets old pretty quickly to me. And some of the scenes kind of start to play a little too comic-y, which I don't think was the intention. I mean, at times it is, but it kind of loses that balance at times for me. But yeah, the music stuff, like the jokes on music fans, or just the way they portray them are pretty fun. And any kind of movie that's based in the 80s, like I like listening like to the score and the soundtrack, like those kind of things hit pretty fun, and they're kind of cool throughout the movie. And this is no exception. I mean, the little synthy type stuff is always layers in nicely for me. But I really like whatever Alexandria Daddario, whatever her name is. Mm-hmm. I think she's actually pretty fun in the movie. Like once she kind of goes like all for it, I think she's kind of like turns into a pretty fun performance.
Last time we talked about our rating system, which if you're new to the show, we long ago established the rating system of go ahead is our highest rating, because we're saying go ahead, watch it, and then wait for it, which I think last week we basically decided it works for the digital home release era as well. It just means wait for it to be more, wait for it to be your tempo, wait for it to be free or cheaper or on Netflix or whatever it is. So wait for it. That's our middle ground. That means like don't pay maximum dollar for this one. And then the last one is hold up, and that means there's nothing for you to see here. You can imagine sort of a street cop blowing a whistle and waving you away from that movie. That's a hold up. this movie for me was definitely a wait for it.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
See that, guys? There's so much lore in this episode. We're doing the 100 episode countdown to the end. We're talking about our rating system. Movie Schmovie is back.
Yeah, we're back, man. Oh, I guess I'll rattle off a couple things that I've seen. Bloodshot with Val Kilmer. What am I doing right now? I'm in like a crazy brain fart.
I think it may have been better with either of those guys in it. Yeah.
Do I need to see it?
I saw that.
It's really
I saw
bad.
that too, and I would agree
special
with you.
effects are really cool. What else? I saw. I paid for Louis C.K.'s new special, Sincerely Louis C.K. I really enjoyed it. I understand that, like, you know, he's pretty much banished from the industry, but there is some remorse in his special, and I think if anybody wants to see anything and understands his sense of humor, understands that he's kind of pleading his case in some way. You know, he's not making any excuses, but it's a good special. Extraordinary, finally got to see that. John, the best recommendation
I'm so glad you dug it.
ever, man. Aaron and I watched it, and we loved it. It's like Ghostbusters meets, I don't know, like New Zealand humor. It's like really interesting, man. Like I really enjoyed it.
But don't you love her now, Maeve Higgins? Wouldn't you watch her in anything at this point? She was so good.
Yes, she was so good, man. I saw Warner Brothers animated feature Mortal Kombat Legends, Scorpion's Revenge. If you like Mortal Kombat and you like the first Mortal Kombat movie, or you just want to learn about the world of Mortal Kombat, this is the most violent, entertaining cartoon you will see.
Wow.
It is so violent. Spears are going through people's heads. People are getting their necks snapped off. Arms are being... It is so good. And it kind of takes the place of the first movie that came out in, what was that, the 90s?
Yeah.
In the late 90s? Yeah, it's a solid watch, man. And then TV shows, if I can rattle off a couple, Briar Patch with Rosario Dawson. I'm really, really enjoying it. I'm not finished it yet. Bravest Warriors, which is done by the same people that do Adventure Time. I can watch 1 million episodes of that. Devs, which you guys talked about before, is so goddamn good, man. I don't know what I was doing. Why did I delay my watching of this show?
Ronald, do you know why you delayed it? Because it's great. It's great to end up with a few episodes to watch at once. That's why you delayed it.
Yes. Nick Offerman is doing something like magical on screen, man. Like, I don't know where he stands in all of this stuff right now, but he is so unpredictable in a lot of ways, and I kind of love that. And then also I started on What We Do in the Shadows, season 2. Is it season 2 or season 3?
Season 2.
Season 2?
It's season 2, yeah.
Season 2. And man, what a strong opening 2 episodes, man. Like I remembered why I love that show so much. Erin pretty much watches that show on repeat. She has been for the past week. And I'm a big fan. And this season 2 is a great opener to kind of get us into the world of insane vampires. So
Lots of cool stuff.
yeah.
I was going to ask you something. Oh, Ronald. You said you watched Briar Patch, right?
Yes.
And are you liking it, or?
I'm like 2 or 3 episodes into it. I think I do, man. I do. It's just the pace of it is something I don't think I've ever seen before. I can't figure out. My issue is, can Rosario Dawson carry this show?
I think one of the writers and showrunners is Andy Greenwald, who is one of the he's on like the Ringer Network, and he does a couple podcasts that I listen to. Most people may know him from The Watch with him and Chris Ryan co-host that podcast for the Ringer Network. But he's like kind of been off doing the Briar Patch thing. So it's been really interesting, you know, when he came back to the show once that first season was done, like listening to him talk about the production and like, you know, working with Rosario and Jay and all those, you know, whoever's involved in the show. Like, it's just, I haven't gotten around to watching it yet, but I'm really excited to watch it because I really like him. And it seems like kind of like a sister show to like Fargo type of world. Like, it seems like that kind of tone. Yes. Which is really intriguing. That's kind of, it's queued up. I got to catch up on that, but I'm glad to hear that you're watching it and liking it.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying it. I just haven't quite figured out. Rosario Dawson is such an interesting character, man, and all the people around her are doing this like pretty amazing stuff, and I can't quite figure out if I like her yet or not. But she's entertaining, man. She's entertaining to watch. It's a cool show.
Speaking of her, did you guys see she's basically sort of, I guess, possibly confirmed that she's going to be in season 2 of The Mandalorian?
Yes.
I don't even know that character that much because I haven't watched all the Clone Wars animation that has had that character in it. But I think that's great casting. I love her, and I think she probably has exactly the right tone for this world that they're creating. Not just in the kind of modern Star Wars era, but the way that The Mandalorian is working. I expect her to be super charming and have a lot of fun stuff to do if they use her well on that show. So I'm all about that.
Great casting.
And I also heard that Ming-Na Wen's character from season 1 is supposed to be returning, and I felt like that character was underserved. I thought she was cool. I loved seeing her in that world. So I'm excited. If that character comes back, I'm fine with that because she sort of seemed dead, but we didn't really have any reason to think she was confirmed dead. In fact, that episode ended on a very ambiguous note. If you'll recall the episode that Ming-Na Wen was in.
Yes.
So I thought she was great casting for Star Wars, and I was happy to see her. And when it looked like she was only in like an episode and then she was done, I was kind of like, oh, that kind of sucks. So yes, if she's back, that's another good sign that whatever they're doing over there on Mandalorian season 2, there ought to be some cool faces to see in the mix.
Definitely. Yeah.
It's exciting, man.
Anything else you guys want to throw out there that you've seen or plan to watch in the coming days?
I saw The Gentleman. Did you guys see The Gentleman?
Yeah.
I liked it, man.
I thought it was great. I really liked it.
I liked it. I think that it felt like Guy Ritchie was getting back to the roots of what he does best, which is crime circle films of varying groups of people being extra shitty to each other. I just really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's like it's a little more streamlined, a little simpler, nothing too flashy, but kind of getting into that sweet spot, that pocket that most people know him, like kind of getting away from the Sherlock, the King Arthur, the Aladdin world. It's just like it's more akin to like, the Lock, Stocks, the Snatch types movies, and with like a really kind of cool cast and a lot of character actors that you see around, and even people like Hugh Grant and Colin Farrell like getting an opportunity to really chew up some scenery. But yeah, I thought it was great. I really liked The Gentleman. I think that's one of the last movies I saw in theaters before they closed. I was able to catch. It was like showing at like one. It was showing at like one time a day at the Owings Mills, and like the week before the theaters closed, I went like on a Monday night and saw it, and it was like that and The Way Back were like the last two that I got to see before the theaters closed. Well, if you guys are good, I think we should wrap this up.
Do it.
Do it, guys. Movieschmovie.net. And what else? Facebook.com/movieschmovie.
Steve, they could also just go ahead and go to movieschmovie.com.
Yeah, you know what? I think I just I was wondering. I think I just screwed that up. We have the .com as well. That's how many people go to our websites, including myself.
Steve, quick question. Have you been traveling through time?
I may have been, because I did hear a Ron John at the beginning of the podcast. I think it put me in a loop or some sort of weird continuum. I think I'm back, though. But yeah, so I think we have the .com. We definitely do. I've confirmed such. If you care to go to our website, that no one visits, but that's fine.
We might even be at movieschmovie.edu. I'm not sure. We really got to check on all this.
I think I'm gonna just go buy all of the whatevers just to cover the bases while we're at it. .io, .edu, .org, .co. I'll get it all covered. But yeah, I mean, when we post this episode, the main place to engage is probably facebook.com/movieschmovie. But if you've seen any of the stuff that we're talking about, or of stuff that's coming up that need to be on our radar to talk about on a future episode, comment on this Facebook post if you're looking at this episode on Facebook. And if not, you can find the Facebook page and leave us a comment, because that's cool. Because I'm sure there's probably tons of stuff out there, TV, movies that we just haven't seen, haven't even heard about, little treasures buried deep into that browse category on Netflix or wherever it might be. But let us know if you found something that we should to check out or talk about on the show. And yeah, we'll talk to you guys next week. But as always, you've made our day. Thanks.
Bye.